Welcome to Culture Makers with Josh Wilson. We're introducing Chuck Thurston today.
Hey.
Going to speak with us. Howdy, Chuck. He's a digital
Hey, Josh.
artist. He's a digital artist and photographer and has been a regular contributor at Burning Man for the last 10 years, offering talks and workshops on a variety of topics related to spiritual understanding and emerging human potentials. He's been on the Cosmic Citizen blog talk radio broadcast for quite a while and also works with Derek Samras on the production of video podcasts for the Urantia Book Network, UBN. You can find those on YouTube and Facebook. Recently at Burning Man, when they were still going, he spoke on the topic of new technologies and how they offer metaphors and concept models that help us expand our understanding of the human organism and how it's able to support consciousness and achieve connectivity with mind and spirit. Okay, so the topic today is dealing with the Lucifer Rebellion. We're going to dive into that topic. And so could you give us a little outline on what we might call cosmic justice?
Yeah. Well, this is our whole conversation today is going to be within a cosmic frame. And I find that to be very helpful. I mean, it was helpful in my life to discover that there are cosmic dimensions to what we experience on this planet. We're not just alone here. We're not alone on this planet. We're not alone in the universe, either one. That there's a celestial oversight and administration of the affairs of the universe, even though we don't ordinarily see that or know about that. But that's something that Josh and I have both learned about from the Urantia Book. If any of you are familiar with that. It's a purported revelation. You can decide for yourself after looking at it. But it's the only source of information that I'm aware of that gives us this perspective, gives us an off-planet perspective, you might say, on what's going on this planet. And I find that to be extremely helpful. And it also gives us a wonderful revelation of the nature of God and God's place in the universe and our relationship to God and how important that is, because God is the source, first source, center. It's the organizing principle, you might say, for final reality and all reality, and always available, living within us. All these different aspects of the divine nature are available to us, but we have to grow into that. We have to discover it. We have to master ourselves and become more like God, but the resources are always there. So,
okay, Chuck.
Yeah.
This gives us a frame. From what you said, we can see we're really talking about a universe reality frame where we're involved. The first source and center, the Heavenly Father, is involved. And our local universe, Father, Mother, God, creators, all these influences and many more, which we can go into, are involved. Specifically, we've got this, what some might think of as an arcane kind of a topic, but we find out it actually has a lot to do with explaining this incredible weirdness that's going on in our society right now that a lot of people are asking about and puzzled over, like, wow, what did we just go through in the last 18 months with COVID? Why is there so much confusion on all different levels? Well, there's some background reasons. And so just to define some terms, we're talking about the Lucifer Rebellion and an adjudication judgment time frame. Well, that's a big mouthful because, first of all, we have to talk about, like a lot of people have a sense from the Bible, we've heard the terms, or we've seen it in literature or art, music throughout the centuries. Concepts of Lucifer, we have this kind of vague idea that this being fell down from on high. We have several references to the devil in the Bible.
Satan, of course.
And Satan. So we got Lucifer, his lieutenant Satan, and then on the earth, this devilish personality, which the Urantia Book actually names, like this is a real person that was mulling around about, went haywire about 300,000 years ago. And if I remember correctly, so this is something we've been dealing with for a long time. So if this has been going on for so long, then, how come we're just learning some of the important details about it? Like, for example, Chuck, could you tell me about how old Lucifer is?
Well, let's see. He's been
Yeah, so I was wondering, do you have an idea how old Lucifer is?
Yeah, well, the Urantia Book puts him in a frame that's in hundreds of billions of years.
That's incredible. And
so he is a type of being that was created just after the physical establishment of our local universe. He's one of the first beings that was created. He's a type of being that serves as he's an administrative type of being.
Okay.
That, these, their Urantia Book calls them Lenonendek sons. That may not have meaning for some people, but it's an order of being that's created by our deity parents to serve as administrators, to serve as trusted administrators, you might say, at the different levels of organization within our local universe. So
when people study the problems going on in the world, a lot of people get into, for example, studies of, say, the French Revolution and the writings that say that this was organized by secret societies involving the Freemasons and the Jesuits and various ones that were. So, and the definitive book on that was written by Burrell, and it still has purchase today with people who study history and so forth. So even in that kind of a study, we find out, hey, there's levels of individuals and orders and groups and influencers that throughout history, and we could do another, that was in the 1700s, but we could do another analysis for today. And so it's not really that much of a stretch to think that this could be happening or is indeed happening on the universe level. Of course, some people have not thought that, well, maybe there are other planets and other orders. But I think today, I mean, a lot of people are starting to think, yeah, we have been visited.
Well, a lot of the problems that you're referring to that are part of our history are rooted in what we're talking about.
Yeah.
For example, when Lucifer launched his rebellion within the system, so the level of organization we're talking about is what the Urantia Book refers to as our local system, which when it's complete, will have about 1,000 inhabited worlds. So this is overseen by a universe administrator, one of these sons, and in our case, it was Lucifer. He was responsible for this system of worlds, of which our planet is one.
Okay, well, that's really different than just thinking of Lucifer as being like this being that's been the nemesis of Earth alone. And
right. I mean, that's more.
He was actually over hundreds of planets, maybe 600 some out of a total potential of 1,000 planets in a system. And that a certain number of these, 30 some, actually went into rebellion.
Joined the rebellion.
Yeah, this is a much different thought. But I'd just like Chuck to take a moment to try to frame the idea and help us to think about how we humans start out on our limited ability on our planet to work on jurisprudence. We've inherited English jurisprudence. It's become part of our system now. And interestingly, we inherited this thing of 12 jurors that all have to agree unanimously on something. A lot of people are not aware of this in a jury trial. This is,
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
used to just kind of settling disputes, maybe in our own families
Yeah.
or organizations or
Well, that's a way
friendship.
of guaranteeing fairness,
Yeah, that
because
that's
you never know with those jurors what influences might be in play.
right. Yeah.
And
So
if somebody's being like, paid off under the table to go the other way, that like throws a monkey wrench in the whole thing. And we
yeah.
hope those things don't happen.
Yeah. So
But
like, for example, we're dealing in the Me Too movement right now, where a lot of women, mostly, although some men, but a lot of women have made their complaints against men, say, that are in positions of power in the entertainment industry, in politics, in business,
yeah.
that they find, they're coming forward and saying, me too. I also had a
Uh-huh.
problem. I was mistreated and I'm not going to be
Yeah.
silent any longer. And
Mhm.
some of these, like before the Me Too movement came about, we had earlier rumblings of this, and I'm aware of court cases that have been going on 20 years now that are
Mhm.
just, does that seem like a long time to you? 20 years?
Well, in human terms, that does seem like a long time. I mean, the thing with human justice is, they always say it should be swift. If you look at the symbol for justice, the blind lady with the the what does she have? She has like a
Scales.
balance in one hand and like a scepter in the other.
Yeah.
So you reach a balance, but then it has to be swift. So the idea with human justice is, if somebody's doing bad things, they need to be brought to justice as soon as possible to bring that to an end. And we have our laws and our mechanisms for doing that, which sometimes work well and sometimes not so well. But in the case we're talking about here, we're talking about a very high being, a high universe being, a being of light. I mean, the very name Lucifer means the light bringer. So he was a brilliant being. But the problem with these universe administrators that can come up sometimes is, we're way out here in the outskirts of the universe, right? We can't just go down the street and see God personally, right? We have faith that he exists and we feel his presence within us. But these high beings have a tendency to self-deify
Ah.
because they're so brilliant. They just say, well, I'm just going to be my own God and I can do whatever I want, right?
Mhm.
So this is sort of the essence of the Lucifer rebellion, was this assertion that, well, we can't see God, so we're not even going to believe God exists. So therefore, you can just do whatever you want. So it was unbridled self-assertion, or unbridled self-liberty was the kind of the cry of the Lucifer rebellion. So the removal of obligations having to do with decency and fairness, and also accountability before God. So this is what he kind of pulled away, but in the name of liberty, right?
Mhm.
So it becomes very confusing, and we can see how this plays out even every day, in what we find going on around us on this planet is this tendency to self-deify.
Mhm.
Because I'm do what thou wilt. I'm going to do whatever I want. There's no accountability. There's no checks and balances. There's no anything. It's just up to me to do whatever I want. Right.
Wasn't that Anton LaVey's statement
right? Yeah.
from his
Anton,
satanic
yeah. Church of
papers and
Satan.
viewpoint? It's like, do as thou wilt. I know he didn't
Do it
invent it, but he certainly espoused that and brought that forward. I'm really glad, Chuck, that you brought up this thing of self-assertion as being kind of like the battle cry, you might say, of the Lucifer Manifesto and the rebellion. And to
Right.
me, the flip side of that, or the truth for people that are wanting to serve God and walk in love and mercy and truth, beauty and goodness, that you and I
Yeah.
have
The
been
way you get
endeavoring
to
to
that
do.
place is through self-restraint,
Yeah. And I was
which
also
is
thinking that then that self-restraint then results in self-realization and
right. Yeah.
self-actualization,
Right.
which is so different from self-assertion. There's something about just that word, assertion.
Uh-huh.
And I think
Yeah.
we know people that do that. And we've
Right.
known times that we've made errors where we
Yeah.
started to do it in
I
our
mean,
own
there's
lives.
a part to that. I remember back in the 70s when assertiveness training was like a thing, right?
Uh-huh.
There was a good side to that, because I think a lot of people were just swallowing their feelings. They were not speaking up, like you mentioned the Me Too movement. So there's something to be said for speaking up when there's something wrong, right?
Right.
And sort of this training was kind of about that, how to communicate, how to make your needs known, all of that. And that's fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is doing bad things on purpose, right? Strategically, because as a way to achieve wealth, power, control over other people, and that sort of thing. That's not brought into the arena of accountability that we talk about in terms of God's will. So we know that God is overseeing all of this and that he has the best outcomes in mind for all of us. So there's this concept of the greatest good for the greatest number over the greatest period of time. And that's kind of a working definition maybe of what God's will is, if you want to think in terms of an actual decision like you're making in your life. Is this going to be good for other people? Maybe it's good for me, but is it also going to contribute to the greater good?
Yeah.
So there's a sense of serving the whole that's lost if you collapse down to where you're only serving yourself. And that's kind of one of the problems that's come out of the Lucifer Rebellion, because that was what it was really all about, in the name of liberty, right? But it's false liberty. So there's true liberty and false liberty. False liberty is just doing whatever you want. And that usually doesn't work out too well in the long run, right?
Well, yeah, this is the Lucifer.
Yeah.
This is the Lucifer and the Satan and the devil, or Caligastia. Urantia Book actually gives a name for the devil, and that creature is still running around on the face of the earth. So we want to get more into that in a minute, but right now I'd like to maybe change focus a little bit and talk about the idea of sympathy for the devil, or sympathy for Lucifer, or sympathy for any high iniquitous beings that are doing what you described, doing evil on purpose.
Well, this gets into the difference between human justice and divine justice, or cosmic justice, or justice in the universe, which are approached differently, especially where matters of rebellion are concerned.
Okay, so to kind of wedge open this topic a little bit, I'd like to give a quote from the lyrics of the song by the Rolling Stones. Sympathy for the Devil, as written by Mick Jagger. And it starts out like this: please allow me to introduce myself. I've been around for a long, long year, stole many a man's soul and faith. I was around when Jesus Christ had his moment of pain, made sure that Pilate washed his hands and sealed his fate. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guessed my name. But what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. It goes through several verses, and it talks about, the influence upon various evils, like the killing of the czars and the Kennedys. And then he goes on a little bit farther, and he reveals who this is. And it says, just call me Lucifer, because I'm in need of some restraint. So if you meet me, have some courtesy, have some sympathy, use all your well-learned politeness, or I'll lay your soul to waste. Hope you guessed my name. Yeah, so this shows that, the concept of high beings that go astray and create a lot of confusion and wreak havoc has come into our culture in various ways, even the Rolling Stones. So what is your feelings about that topic?
Well, what's interesting about that to me is that all those things he describes in that song, all these bad things, the killing of the Kennedys, the czars, all of that, Pilate, none of that was actually done by Lucifer. It was all done by humans who fell under his influence, perhaps, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here, is this sympathy for the devil that then gives people a sense of permission, perhaps, but also, there's kind of an ironic twist of meaning in the title of the song, I think, because it also has to do with Lucifer being blamed for a lot of things he didn't actually do. So he said, give Lucifer some sympathy because he didn't actually do all this stuff. It was all done by maybe his human followers, or unwittingly, wittingly, either way, who knows?
Right.
But in terms of the outworking of what to do with a being like this, it has to do with the recognition that the only reason they can continue to have influence is because people have sympathy for them. And sometimes that sympathy takes them, be like joining the rebellion, for example. So in universe terms, as long as there's sympathy for these beings, they can't be taken out of circulation.
Okay, now you bring up that's a very interesting point, because that's something we haven't really heard before.
Yeah.
This concept of how does the judgment of high beings such as Lucifer or Satan, beings like that, how is that affected by other people? And I want to give a quote, because you wrote an excellent paper on this. I think that Chuck has written the definitive paper on this. We're going to make it available for anybody who wants a copy of it. And in it, you quote from the Urantia Book, and you say that it must be ensured that the complete determination of attitude on the part of all beings in any way concerned therewith is allowed full development.
Right.
So all beings. So could you explain that, please?
Yeah. So that actually involves two different populations, you might say.
Mhm.
So even with like, let's say a mafia boss or something, or in this case, we have these high beings. There's on the human level, there's people who join their cause, who work with them, who join the rebellion, who see that they can have wealth and power if they cooperate with the devil or all this kind of stuff. So they're on board with it. They're always going to have sympathy for the real leaders of the rebellion. But then there's this other population, which is everybody else that wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
They see the evil nature of it, and the destructive nature of it, and the power for bad things to happen. It's wrapped up in this unbridled sense of permission that you can just do whatever you want, right? And so the followers of the rebellion, what has to happen with that group is that all spiritual values have to die. Like, these people have to become so bad that there's no spiritual values left in their morality. That they're completely wedded to what the Urantia Book would call sin or rebellion, which is doing bad things deliberately on purpose for your own advantage and personal gain. So all spiritual value has to die in that population, right? They have to be like they become completely unreal when that happens, essentially. It's like joining the rebellion is like cosmic suicide, because you become unreal. The farther you go down that path, your connection to the progressing energies and developments of the universe, you're completely severed from all of that. So you become completely unreal. And it's only then that you'll be removed from existence.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what you're talking about, like that level of evil. I mean,
yeah, I know.
It's like if we get into movies or literature, we're all familiar with the evil genius, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this shows up in a lot of movies, the James Bond movies.
Or like Voldemort. It's a pretty good example.
Yeah, perfect example.
Yeah,
so
right.
We're all familiar with this idea conceptually.
Of doing bad things on purpose.
Evil genius
for your own power.
It's only, just wants to decimate everyone else. So we're familiar, but then what we're doing today is we're actually saying that this is not just fiction. This is not fiction or literature.
Yeah.
This actually is going on in our universe. And these storylines that come down and filter into our literature and our movies, it gets there because it came from a source, a conceptual source where this is actually going on.
Right. There's echoes going back in our mythologies and our legends going back way, way far, farther than most people even realize.
Right.
And those echo forward into the present. And we're influenced by even, the tenets of the Lucifer Rebellion are still in play. Once you understand what they are, you can see them and what goes on every day.
Yeah, a lot of people, Chuck, are interested in ancient archaeology, and the hidden history of the planet and so forth. They're trying to uncover, who the Nephilim are and the Anunnaki and all this kind of thing. And but this is part of it. So how many years back does this go that our planetary prince, or what we now call the fallen one, the evil one, the devil,
the prince of darkness, prince of darkness.
How long has this been the case?
Well,
if we actually knew our history,
occurred about 200,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot going on this planet even before that. I mean, he had been a loyal director of the evolution of this planet for 300,000 years.
300,000 years before. So we're going back 500,000 years.
We're going back like 500,000 years.
Yeah,
but we're going back in the very early times.
Yeah, so if people are interested in the ancient history of our planet, let me tell you, you don't have to just piece together tiny little fragments and hope somebody can like channel some information from some extraterrestrials or something like this. I mean, we actually have the written account of those that were present on or around the earth when these things were taking place. So this means for the past 200,000 years that we've had just a very confused and rough and tumble state of affairs with all of our institutions. Could you address that, please?
Yeah. Well, let me just, maybe this will lead into that, just to complete the thought from a minute ago about these two different groups that are tied up in the adjudication process. So those who do not join the rebellion, the condition that has to be met, like with us, presumably, is that all sympathy for the rebellion has to come to an end.
Wow.
So those who are loyal to the rebellion, all spiritual values have to die. And those who are not part of the rebellion, all sympathy for the rebellion has to die. So and that has to happen throughout the entire population of the system of Satanian, which is a huge number of beings.
Well, that's really a total novel way of looking at this whole question, which brings in a really high level, but beautiful, once you understand it, concept of justice and mercy working that comes to a final result in our universe. But you know what it sounds like? It's like you and I were talking a while back, and you said that it was like if some heinous crime had been committed in the United States, that it would be necessary for every citizen,
for everyone, the
entire U.S.,
jury of the entire population.
Okay, now this is a pretty radical concept. I mean, I think we should talk about that. So, could you kind of flesh that out a little bit? Why?
Well, that's kind of what's going on here. I mean, let's say you had some mastermind, and he pulled a whole bunch of people over to his side, and they were running around doing all kinds of horrendous things, and he gets apprehended, right? Then, in order to adjudicate that, like let's say the death penalty was what was in, hanging in the balance with that individual. Then the equivalent would be that everyone who was not part of his team would have to agree, we don't want anything to do with this guy, right? And everybody that is part of his team would have to reach the same level of habitual evil as this mastermind criminal, because they're also all going to be annihilated. They're all going to be annihilated. Everyone that joins the rebellion is going to be annihilated eventually. So it's important that there be no living value in these people, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what's at play here. And that the people who are not to be annihilated, who didn't join the rebellion, all sympathy for it has to come to an end, because if let's say they annihilate Lucifer, and then like the next day, I kind of like Lucifer, that would be a seed for future rebellion. And that's kind of what's at stake. That's what makes it so difficult. It's like once rebellion begins, it has to be allowed to play out to its ultimate conclusion.
Okay, this is incredible. We're going to take a short break now on Culture Makers. We'll be right back in a minute, so stay tuned.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Chuck, about now we're coming back from the break.
Uh-huh.
The next topic is, yeah, we're dealing with such, horrible actions that are so mean-spirited and destructive that we almost need words for it.
Right.
Like, could you give us a little feeling of the levels of evil moving up to sin
Yeah.
and then kind of culminating in iniquity, which would, be that really hard-boiled level? Could you explain that for us?
Yeah. Well, it all has to do with kind of our quality of motivation. What is it that we really desire? What is our heart's desire? Do we want to be a good person? Do we want to help? Do we want to make things better for everyone? Right? These are qualities of motivation that are easily aligned with God, because that's also what God wants. So when we're motivated by these values of truth, beauty, and goodness and love, then we can build community, we can build relationships, we can build into the future, and we have a sense of continuity and reliability that everyone is operating under good intentions. They want that greater good, and the presence of God within us and with us can guide us and help us and inspire us with that. But at the same time, we're also imperfect, right? We have all kinds of urges and things going on within us, confusion, misunderstanding. There's a lot that can throw us off our path. There's a lot that we can do our best and still mess up. We can fail. But when we're trying to do the right thing and we fail, that falls into the category what the Urantia Book would refer to as evil, which is like honest mistakes. They're correctable mistakes. So evil in that sense is maybe a little different than how people understand it generally. But it's helpful because it gives us a way of understanding that we are going to screw up. We're going to do bad things, not on purpose, but just because of our inherent imperfections and our lack of knowledge and understanding sometimes. So these aren't done on purpose, but when we discover that we've done something, we've made a mistake, then we learn from that. We try not to repeat it, right? So that's a good quality of motivation, a good-hearted approach to life, and a good way to build relationships.
Yeah, that's very good. So that's evil. That is, in another word, we could say we're immature.
Yeah, it's like immaturity, imperfection, all of that.
Yeah.
And our imperfection is important because our goal is to overcome that through self-mastery, spiritual self-mastery.
Right.
And then we can look back at who we've been and say, yeah, I've come somewhere. I'm a better person today than I was before. And that process of becoming a better person brings us closer to God. We can become more godlike. So that's all supported by the universe. It's understood that we're going to make mistakes. But the point is we pick ourselves up, right? And we acknowledge if we've done something wrong and we try to correct it. The transition line where rebellion comes in is where people do bad things on purpose. They know it's bad. It's not just like, oh, I got carried away by my passions. I mean, crimes of passion, like let's just say you're really angry with somebody, right? And you do something you regret, right? That would be in the category of evil. Even many wars, if it's just like territorial conquest and we're the greatest and whatever, those are kind of natural impulses that are part of our nature, right? And we grow from that. We try to improve and get better. But when bad things are done on purpose as a strategy, because nobody expects you to do that, right? So when you lie and you deceive and you get people to believe things that aren't true because it gives you an advantage over them, right? You know it's bad. You know it's wrong to lie. You know it's wrong to deceive, but it gives you power, right? And may even bring you great wealth. That's where we get it across the line into what the Urantia Book refers to as sin. And when that becomes a habit, when that becomes your lifestyle, when everything you do is motivated that way, then it crosses the line into iniquity, which is like there's almost no way to pull you back from that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the thing about the rebellion, Lucifer, Satan, our planetary administrator known as Caligastia or the devil, the thing about them is they encourage this behavior and they tempt with the potential outcomes that you think you can gain. from doing bad things on purpose. Right. Well,
Okay, that's really good
yeah.
explanation of evil, sin, and iniquity. Is there something you wanted
Yeah.
to say further about that before we go into how our institutions have been affected?
Yeah. Well, the main thing about it is if you go in that direction, you're abandoning love.
Oh,
That's the main thing. And in particular, you're abandoning love for God. And as you abandon love for God, you become unreal. Whereas in the opposite direction, you become more real. So like we have this children's story, like the Velveteen Rabbit, if you've ever read that,
yeah.
right? The rabbit becomes real, right? Because he's loved into reality, right?
Yeah.
Or even with Pinocchio.
Yeah, Pinocchio became a real boy.
He became a real boy, right? Because he was loved and he loved in return.
Yeah.
So that's how it is with us in relationship to God. We become real through love, right? And when that goes away, we become unreal.
Yeah, true.
And that's when people become dangerous because there's no accountability. There's no obligation, fraternal obligations, or sense of rightness or virtue governing behavior. And they may be the ones who are like on top tiers in entertainment and industry. You know, you're talking about the institutions of society. They may achieve very high positions, particularly politics or entertainment or some of these other things, because they have this unbridled sense of self that in some ways can be creative, but it's not really contributing value. It's just self-aggrandizing. Mm-hmm. So there's the discernment has to take place if you're like trying to evaluate a situation or a person, are they adding value to the greater good, or are they just aggrandizing themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one way of looking at it. That's one way of evaluating it. And people who are motivated that way, if they get in high positions, in like corporations, or government, or industry, or entertainment, they can very easily just brush aside considerations of realization that, hey, this is going to hurt a lot of people if I do this, right? But I don't care. I'm just going to do it anyway. Because that's, then I'll have like a new car. I have lots of drugs. I have lots of girls. I have lots of this, that, and the other thing, right? Because they abandoned all those restraints that God-knowing people, let's say, would bring into play that would restrain them. They say, well, they would turn to God and say, is this okay for me to do this? That they would check with the big guy upstairs, right? As to their conceptions of how to move forward with their lives. Because you want to be in partnership with God. You want that relationship. You want that
checking with our sponsor.
Yeah,
sure we're doing the right thing or not. I mean,
right. Or on the other hand, are you drawing closer to this other being who is all the time sort of saying, yeah, there is no God. So philosophical atheism, which is a thing, on this planet, is born from the Lucifer Manifesto. That's the first tenet of the Lucifer Manifesto, is that our Heavenly Father, God our Father, does not exist.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty heavy.
The
idea
creators of making them up to rule in His name.
Yeah, the idea of a manifesto, like this would be a new concept to a lot of people, but like we're familiar with the Communist Manifesto by
all these
Karl
values
Marx, right?
have manifestos.
Yeah, and so, but we're talking about in this big blue book.
Yeah,
see if I have a copy of it here. Yes, I've got some on the shelf here. That talks about the Lucifer Manifesto,
right?
That you can actually read point by point by point.
Exactly.
These main concepts. And then there are people that are just so much into self that they don't believe in God, but they also don't believe in anything like the devil or Lucifer. I have no concept of that.
Yeah.
It's just that they believe all those tenets of the Lucifer Manifesto.
These ideas are taught.
Yeah.
In our institutions.
Right.
And it's very easy to just say, oh, okay, and accept some of these ideas. But there's a whole vast population of people who are innocently drawn into these things.
Right.
Like if you've ever known very many atheists, a lot of them are highly moral. They're very virtuous. They see it as what they're really throwing out is institutional religion. They've never even met God. They don't have any clue what God is even like, right? They just know they don't want to get trapped in some institutional belief system, which they've determined is maybe at least 50% hooey or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So they're actually well motivated in the idealism of their atheism because they're trying to overcome bad teaching.
You're exactly right. And I know
Yeah.
atheists that fit that description perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's like this, what I call the difference between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of good.
Mm-hmm.
Like they really are very stalwart, upright, participants in the kingdom of good. The ones I'm thinking of right now, that really participate and are helping other people. Some of them,
well, like the whole humanist movement, the whole humanist thing,
right?
It's highly moral.
Right. And so what's missing is always different with that is the idea of a personal God.
Right.
What's the kingdom of good is just like it.
Yeah, it's like the brotherhood of man without the fatherhood of God.
Yeah, but this is really life-changing once a person discovers God as a person and a personal God. This is absolutely life-changing.
Well, part of that is the realization that God is not a human invention. I mean, I had to kind of go through that because when you look at religions and what they teach about God, you get the idea that God was made up by these religions, right?
The noblest work of man.
Right. God is just a human invention, a concept that we use to try to whatever, all the different things people say about that. But that's not how it is. God is like the ocean, right? It's there, whether you believe in it or not. Maybe you grow up in the Midwest and you've never seen the ocean, and people tell you, you go far enough in that direction, it's a huge body of water. Here's pictures of it. Look, here's pictures of it. And you go, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to see it, right? So then you'd drive all the way to the coast and you actually put your foot in the water and you experience the ocean. Then it's real, right? Yeah. Before that, it was just an idea. I mean, you could believe or not believe.
Hey, Chuck, this has been an incredible discussion. I've enjoyed it so much, and we covered a topic that you have written about extensively, dealing with it in a lot of different dimensions and octaves of consideration that I encourage everybody to read. And probably the quickest way, I'd like to get it into your hands right away, everyone who's listening, is just to write me at musical, musical, at Cox, COX.net. In other words, musical at Cox.net. And I'll send you a copy right over. The topic today, and I'll give Chuck a chance to kind of wrap things up, but just to reiterate the topic today, I think why it catches people's attention is because we have a sense of wanting to see justice done. I mean, we want to see mercy done. And some of us are even maybe overboard on the mercy to where we lose sight of some other things, but we're trying to kind of balance these out. And yes, mercy is lavish, but we also, in our own societies, we want to see justice done. Sometimes we want to see it done in our own lives and personalities, and we feel like we need to be corrected. And maybe we didn't get the proper parental correction as we're growing up.
I mean, there's just huge numbers of
and so
people walking on this planet through no fault of their own,
right,
that are very broken and confused about reality.
And so so there's a sense of we want things to be right. If there's something that needs to be corrected, and you could call it justice. There's a lot of people out there that call themselves justice warriors. So there's I think a pretty keen interest in this topic. It's just that in today's discussion, you have elevated it for us to a cosmic level, like a universe.
Yeah. Well, there's so many dangers. I mean, even justice can be weaponized.
Yep.
If it's false justice
Right.
can do huge damage to people in their lives.
Right.
So what's kind of saves us from all of that are our standards, kind of our standards of righteousness, but most particularly is our motivations of love. So this is why the existence of God is so important, and particularly the concept that Lucifer denied, which is that God is a parental deity.
Right.
You know, we have these teachings going way back, even to the beginning of 500,000 years ago, where it was revealed that yes, God is a father. And then there's also mother deity too, that there's this parental nature about deity, and we're their children. So anyone who's been a parent, you know, you want your children to survive, if at all possible, right? You know, they have, your child has to go really far to bring their own existence to an end because of the love that's always there to pull them back, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of what's wrapped up in all this concept of justice. There's also fairness. There's also the parental love of God, who wants all his children to survive. But there is a limit. There's a limit where
the story of the universal family.
Yeah, right.
You know, the family of God. It's just so touching and so thrilling that this is actually why we cover topics like this, cosmic justice, because we really don't want anybody to lose out on the beautiful, beautiful eternal future. The door is wide open for all that want to enter, and that's why we make these efforts, and this is why we teach and we cover the topics. This is kind of an unusual one because we're talking about justice on a cosmic level. And that wraps it up for today's program. So it's Culture Makers, and you can write me at musical@cox.net. And do you want to say anything, Chuck, about where people can listen to your radio programs, podcasts, and so forth? Let us know where people can hear you.
If you go on YouTube, just search for UBN, Spirit of Truth. You'll find a channel, YouTube channel, where we've been uploading a whole series of podcasts. Derek and I have been working on this, and we just have a conversation mainly about topics from the Urantia book, but they end up being kind of universal and relevant to just self-development, transformation, you know, making things better in any way you could think about. So you might enjoy some of those. They're on a range of personally practical topics, even though they get into some of the depths of revealed religion and the nature of God. So
yeah, you're right. They really do. Yeah, Urantia Book Network, UBN.
Urantia Book Network.
Spirit of Truth. You can just type in these keyword searches and you'll find much more of Chuck Thurston and what he has to share. So thank you, Chuck, for being on the Culture Makers program today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do it some more. Look forward to it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.